Somewhere around 40,000 years ago, a human lay down on cold ground inside a cave in southern France. No pillow, no blanket, just animal skin, rock, and the dying glow of a fire. And at some point during the night, that person dreamed. We don't know what they saw. Maybe a hunt that hadn't happened yet. Maybe a river they'd crossed 3 days earlier. Maybe the face of someone who had already died. Maybe something that made no sense at all. A deer with the wrong number of legs, a sky that was somehow below them, a sound with a color. Whatever it was, when they woke up, they had a problem, because nothing in their entire experience of being alive had prepared them for what just happened. They had been somewhere, they had seen things, they had felt fear or joy or falling, and now they were back, on the same cold ground, in the same cave, with the same fire that had gone out. They assumed it was real. The oldest known dream record comes from Mesopotamia, roughly 5,000 years ago. Clay tablets, cuneiform pressed into wet earth. The Sumerians didn't just write down their dreams. They built an entire system around them, professional dream interpreters, dream dictionaries. If you dreamed of flying, it meant one thing. If you dreamed of losing your teeth, and yes, people were already having that dream 5,000 years ago, it meant something else. The Egyptians went further. They built dedicated temples where people could go specifically to dream. You'd fast for days, perform rituals, then sleep in a stone chamber and wait for a message from the gods. There was a waiting list. This was a medical procedure. A priest would analyze what you saw and prescribe treatment based on it. The Greeks inherited this system and gave it a name, enkoimesis, ritual sleep, 300 temples across the ancient world dedicated to one idea, that when you close your eyes, someone is trying to tell you something. For roughly 4,000 years of recorded history, the entire civilized world agreed on one thing about dreams. They were messages from gods, from the dead, from the future. Dreams predicted wars. Dreams revealed cures. Dreams told kings where to build temples. They told generals where not to march. Nobody, for 4,000 years, seriously considered the possibility that your brain was just doing something on its own, with no sender, no meaning, no divine postal service. Then, in 1899, a doctor in Vienna ruined everything. Sigmund Freud published The Interpretation of Dreams and proposed something radical. Dreams weren't messages from the gods. They were messages from you, specifically from the parts of you that you'd rather not talk about at dinner. Every dream, Freud argued, was a disguised wish, usually involving your parents, usually in ways that made his colleagues deeply uncomfortable. A cigar in a dream was never just a cigar. A staircase was never just a staircase. And somehow, every symbol eventually circled back to the same 3 or 4 things that made Victorian audiences excuse themselves from the room. The scientific community's response was mixed. His theory was unfalsifiable. Whatever you dreamed, Freud could explain it, which meant his explanation explained nothing. But he had done something important. He had moved dreams out of the temple and into the laboratory. For the first time, someone was saying, "This is a brain phenomenon. Whatever dreams are, they come from in here, not up there." The question was no longer, what are the gods telling you? It was, what is your brain doing for 8 hours when you're not using it? In 1953, a graduate student at the University of Chicago named Eugene Aserinsky was running out of ideas for his dissertation. He needed a topic. His advisor, Nathaniel Kleitman, suggested something nobody had seriously studied: what happens to the eyes during sleep. Aserinsky needed a test subject. He used his 8-year-old son, Armand, taped electrodes near the boy's eyes, connected them to an old EEG machine, and watched. What the machine drew made no sense. Roughly 90 minutes after the boy fell asleep, his eyes began darting back and forth beneath closed lids. Rapid, jerky, purposeful movements, like someone watching a tennis match. Aserinsky assumed the machine was broken. He checked the wires, recalibrated, waited for the next cycle. It happened again. Same pattern, same timing. And when he woke his son during these episodes, Armand was dreaming. Every single time. Aserinsky had accidentally discovered REM sleep, the phase where dreams live. And with it, the first hard evidence that dreaming wasn't random. It was scheduled. Your brain entered this state on a timer, cycling in and out roughly every 90 minutes, spending more time there as the night went on. The last 2 hours before you wake up are almost entirely dreams. Your brain was not resting during sleep. It was busy, doing something it considered important enough to schedule like a meeting. 6 years later, in 1959, a French neuroscientist named Michel Jouvet wanted to know what the body does during these dream episodes. He was working with cats, which also have REM sleep, which also dream, which raises questions about what exactly a cat dreams about. And honestly, probably exactly what you'd expect. Jouvet discovered something remarkable. During REM sleep, the brainstem sends a signal that paralyzes the body. Every voluntary muscle below the neck goes limp. You are, for all practical purposes, temporarily disabled from the neck down, every night, on purpose. He proved this by surgically removing the part of the brainstem responsible for this paralysis in his laboratory cats. What happened next became one of the most famous observations in sleep science. The cats acted out their dreams. They stood up, while fully asleep, and stalked invisible prey around the cage. They pounced on nothing. They arched their backs at threats that weren't there. They hissed at empty corners. One cat crouched in hunting position for 45 minutes, tracking something only it could see. Which means your brain does something extraordinary every night. It constructs an entire world, characters, locations, scenarios, emotions, and then locks your body in place so you don't act on any of it. It builds the simulation and the safety cage around it. Now think about that human in the cave 40,000 years ago. No fences, no walls, no locks on the door, sleeping on open ground in a world where everything larger than you wanted to eat you. The paralysis wasn't a design flaw, it was the only reason they survived the night. If they'd stood up and started chasing a dream antelope off a real cliff. But here is where it gets strange. Because if dreams were just replays of your day, a highlight reel of things that already happened, we could file them under memory processing and move on. That is not what dreams are. You've been to places that don't exist, not vaguely imagined places, detailed places, buildings with hallways you've never walked, cities with skylines you've never seen, rooms that feel completely familiar even though you've never been in them. You've looked out windows at landscapes that belong to no country on Earth. You've breathed air that had a specific temperature. You've felt gravity shift. You've had conversations with people who don't exist, not blurry background characters, people with faces, voices, opinions, people who said things that surprised you. How does someone you invented say something you didn't expect? You've flown. Not in a plane, just flown. Arms out, over rooftops, with a feeling of ease so specific that you remember it more clearly than most things that actually happened to you last week. You've been in car chases from movies you've never seen. You've fought in wars from centuries you've never studied. You've spoken languages you don't speak. And then there are the ones that feel like something else entirely. A place so vivid, so internally consistent, so unlike anything in your waking life that it doesn't feel assembled from spare parts. It feels visited, a world with its own weather, its own rules, sometimes its own color of sky. People across every culture and every century have reported the same experience, arriving somewhere in a dream that felt more real than their bedroom. The Aboriginals of Australia built their entire cosmology around it, the Dreamtime. The idea that the dreaming world isn't less real than this one, it's more real. This one is the shadow. Science has no satisfying explanation for why the sleeping brain generates entire realities with architectural detail, populated by strangers with personalities, governed by physics that don't apply here. The best neuroscience can say is that when the prefrontal cortex goes quiet, the part that knows what's plausible and what isn't, the rest of the brain runs unsupervised. No editor, no fact-checker, just raw creative machinery building worlds with no constraints. Which is poetic, but it doesn't explain why those worlds feel like they mean something, why you wake up from certain dreams and spend the entire day carrying a feeling you can't name, a homesickness for a place that was never there. So, the brain builds worlds, entire realities, every night, from scratch. The question is, why? Why not just rest? In the year 2000, a Finnish neuroscientist named Antti Revonsuo at the University of Turku proposed an answer that reframed at least part of it. He called it the threat simulation theory. Revonsuo analyzed thousands of dream reports from studies conducted across multiple cultures and decades, and he found something consistent. Dreams are disproportionately negative. Across all cultures, across all ages, across every data set, people dream about threats far more often than about anything pleasant. Being chased, falling, being attacked, failing, losing something important. Not occasionally, most of the time. Around 70% of dream content involves some form of threat or challenge. Revonsuo's argument was simple. Dreams are rehearsals. Your brain isn't broken when it gives you a nightmare about being chased through a dark parking garage. It's training you, running a simulation of a dangerous scenario, so that if it ever happens in waking life, your response is already partially rehearsed. The fear feels real because it is real, neurologically identical to waking fear. Same adrenaline, same cortisol, same racing heart. The only difference is the paralysis keeping you horizontal. That ancient human on the cave floor? They weren't dreaming about nothing. They were dreaming about the leopard in the tall grass, the rival who wanted their food, the river crossing that killed someone last season. The brain was running the scenarios that mattered most, over and over, night after night, and the ones who dreamed the most vividly about the threat reacted fastest when it arrived. And here you are, 200,000 years later, dreaming about showing up to work without pants on. Your brain is still running threat simulations. It just updated the predators. The leopard became your boss. The river crossing became the presentation. The rival who wanted your food became your ex at a party you weren't expecting them to attend. Same software, modern threats. Your brain doesn't know the difference. We sleep for roughly a third of our lives. If you live to 80, that's 26 years with your eyes closed. And for a significant portion of those 26 years, you are somewhere else entirely. A world your brain built from scratch, populated with people it invented or remembered, running scenarios it decided you needed to see. You never asked for any of it. You can't control it. You can't opt out. The Sumerians thought someone was speaking to them. Freud thought you were speaking to yourself. Revonsuo thinks your brain is protecting you from things that haven't happened yet. And maybe they're all partly right. And maybe none of them explain the planet you visited last Tuesday night. The one with 2 suns and a city you could draw from memory if anyone asked. Because here is what no theory fully explains. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you dream about someone you've lost, and in the dream, they're just there, sitting across from you, talking about nothing important, and for 30 seconds, or 2 minutes, or however long the simulation runs. They're alive again, not symbolically, not metaphorically. Your brain has reconstructed them so completely that the loss hasn't happened yet. And when you wake up, there is a moment, half a second, maybe less, where you've forgotten they're gone. No theory in neuroscience has a good explanation for why that hurts so much, or why, if you asked most people whether they'd want to stop having that dream, they'd say no. 40,000 years ago, someone lay down on cold stone inside a cave, closed their eyes, and went somewhere else. We still don't fully know where. But we go there every night, whether we want to or not.